Welcome, everybody. My name is David Johnston from UAP Medical Coalition. Today, I'm joined by some colleagues and representatives who I will get to introduce themselves shortly. We will be discussing the impacts of a UAP event with interaction that occurred to two UAP field investigators. There will be a link to this original video in the notes below. In this event, two gentlemen observed and recorded a UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or multiple UAP, off the shore of Rhode Island in the United States. The object or objects were visible in the infrared spectrum and not visible to the naked eye. The two investigators painted the UAP with an infrared emitter. And on the second occasion, the UAP appeared to interact with them, and they witnessed and recorded, again through their infrared night vision, something that appeared to move towards them and resulted in them falling to the ground in a state of semi-paralysis. There also seems to have been an impact on the electronic recording equipment that they were utilising to record this event. Today, we'll be looking at some of the mental health impacts that potentially could have affected or did affect these gentlemen. So today, I'm joined, as I mentioned, by some colleagues and representatives. So if you would please introduce yourselves, give a little bit of background about you and your interest in this topic. And I'll start with Dr. Daniel Stubbings and then move on to Deb, on to Les, and on to Sarah.
Well, hello, I'm Dr. Daniel Stubbings. I'm a clinical psychologist in the UK. I originally trained back in Australia, and then the last 10 years I've been out in the UK. 7 of those years I've been working in secure forensic mental health and seen almost every kind of horrific condition you can imagine. I've spent the last 3 years working in cancer and palliative care for the National Health Service. And in that kind of service, I see everything from 20-year-olds to 90-year-olds with all kinds of different cancer issues and palliative conditions. And along the last working as a lecturer, now principal lecturer at Cardiff Metropolitan University. And I regularly attend the Monmouthshire UFO group, the Swansea UFO group, the Unhidden group that's sort of just been launched, and also a member of the SCU, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Deb?
I am a counselor. I've been doing work with clients on mental health issues for over 21 years. And I also have a history of being a caseworker, working in a level 5 school for special needs children. And I'm currently doing something in the equivalency of behavioral support. So that is what I do. Oh, and of course, I also worked with the UAP Medical Coalition, and I'm on Calling All Beings.
Thank you, Deb. Les, over to you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And I'm the chairman and co-founder of Opus, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, which was founded in 1994 as a nonprofit organization. Simply put, our mission is to help people having paranormal experiences, and how we do that is through a confidential international online support group. We also have a referral network of mental health professionals, hypnotherapists, and we also have a triage group, which we call our EST, the Experiencer Support Team, that has a lot of knowledge with regard to many of these types of paranormal phenomena. And so when these people come to us, we find out what it is that they're in need of, and try to point them in the right direction. So thank you very much for having me here. And we're also associated through our organization with the UAP Med.
Thank you very much indeed, Les. And last but by no means least, Sarah.
Hi there. So my name is Sarah, and I too work with the UAP Medical Coalition. I usually am doing more media and helping in and around mental health care, which is why I'm here today. I work professionally as a mental health care provider and outreach coordinator for forensic psychology topics, predominantly sex treatment, and currently working in international crisis and response. So professionally doing the mental health care, but then privately also doing a lot of published research and just reaching out, kind of delegating resources like Les with some of those organizations to help people in need that are having anomalous phenomenon. And so it's really an honor to be here today and help bring some awareness to this.
Perfect. I feel very, very privileged to be joined by such esteemed colleagues. I am not a mental health professional by any stretch of the imagination, although I am a mental health first aider. So as far as my qualifications in this field go. So again, thank you all for bringing to bear your expertise and your knowledge on this topic and subject. I'm going to go backwards this time. So I'm going to start with Sarah and we'll run back through to Les, Deb, and then to Dr. Daniel Stubbings. So first of all, Sarah, I'd like to just ask you, having watched the video, what were your first thoughts and your takeaways on the potential impacts for those two gentlemen?
Okay. Watching the video. So I've seen it a few times and kind of watching it over and back and forward. One of my modalities working with people in assessment spaces is neurolinguistics. So I like to pay attention to people's language, how they're interacting with something. And one of my first takeaways was some of their language and just some of the, whether or not they're being assertive, whether or not they're being passive, whether or not they're being more, instigating or not, and how that relays to something that might be portrayed as hostile. Because, if something is determined hostile, that really changes things politically. It changes how you want to respond. And in the video, the gentlemen, and these are professional researchers, they're really taken back. You see their central nervous system. You see them start to respond emotionally. You see them, pointing laser lights at this. They're seeing interaction in all sorts of ways, and their language saying, "Oh my God, do you see that?" And immediately I think, wow, that the word God is so powerful, with language and just the way that you interact with something, in first response, that initial tone, those initial, walking up to the dog at the Humane Society, when you're not quite sure, that energy, I think, is really important. So immediately I was aware that, okay, this is an emotional response. They're having a reaction here for sure. And how does that play into the equation? And I think after having watched it, a handful of times, I think it's significant. So mentally wise, I think that perspective going into it, just looking at it omnipotently, but then the mental health care concerns for them as individuals, waking up the next day and having swollen lymph nodes, not quite sure where to go, who to call, what to do. And in their case, kind of being nervous that, hey, we work professionally. This is a research space. Do we want to bring this to the higher ups as a concern? What is that? All of those things, all those mental things. For me, it's a really complex thing, which is why I'm, again, I'm glad that we're doing this. But those were my initial thoughts whenever I was watching it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Well, my my initial thought was the fact that it was a great thing that they were together, that here's two people experiencing this phenomena. And so, if it was just one person, I think the reaction would have been totally different. I think that person would wake up and say, did that happen? Did that really happen? Was I really paralyzed? All these kind of things were going through the head, but they were like a support mechanism for one another. So that was the overall thing that I really hit me. That good thing that they were together when this happened, so that they can talk to each other. And that's the one thing that often happens when an experiencer has something happen like this. They're usually alone. There's not many cases where there's multiple people involved. And so this gives them somebody that they can talk to that had the same experience. So that was my initial reaction.
Lovely. And how important is it often, Les, that there is somebody there to support them, to provide that backup that what happened, or what they experienced.
I mean, if that's something that is really important, because they have this experience, and then sometimes they can't talk to their spouse. They can't talk to fellow co-workers. They can't talk to clergy. You know, they're afraid that people will think that they're crazy. You know, so these are the kind of thoughts that start going through people's minds. But here's two professional researchers, okay? They go out there looking for this kind of thing, and they found it. And then they have corroboration between both of them as to what happened. And of course, certainly there's physical aspects of this, as Sarah pointed out, and certainly mental aspects of this, which seeming to me that they handled it pretty well. But you know, long term, how does that affect them? That's a good question. But they seem to be, at least at the end of the interview, to be in a pretty good space. So.
Thank you, Les. Deb.
Yeah, there are a few things that came to mind. One was that they definitely had what I would call like a shock response to what was happening. There was a bit of alarm, and still when they were displaying their videos to explain what happened, I got this feeling that they're like, "Can you believe this happened?" Like this ongoing almost shock that they were dealing with. So one thing that came to mind though is being that they are, you know, seeking this out. How prepared were they mentally for something to happen? Like, is that a factor that people are considering before they go and try to engage with these things? And also the fact that they probably needed some treatment for that shock. And I have to question, you know, why is it so difficult for people to get that support unless they go to a place like Opus? You know, why is it so difficult for people to have these conversations? And even when they're presenting to other people who are, you know, I would say friendly to the topic, they're so cautious and like determined to convince people that it happened. And, you know, there's a lot of questions about what happens at the aftermath and in preparation for something like this.
Yeah, that question of why is it so hard to get treatment, I know is something that we'll pick up as we move through our discussion today. Thank you again, Deb. Daniel, what were your thoughts?
I'll try and, me being me, I have multiple thoughts, but so I'll give the ones that haven't been voiced already. So I guess what I'm about to say isn't really my position on it. I'm just trying to provide a degree of counter push on it. Now, I'll preface that with saying that I'm 100% for reducing stigma, so we can just talk about these things objectively. We can kind of get more of an account about what's happening with people who experience this stuff. And I can talk about the research later, but the profound sense of loneliness that people experience when they've had an encounter and they just other people they can't relate to who haven't had these experiences. They might be at the Walmart or somewhere else and they say, "How was your day?" And you're like, "I've witnessed something that shouldn't exist." Like it's kind of that sense of personal disconnection from others that you classically sort of see in trauma. All those things I don't want to negate. But because I've got different hats on, some the National Health Service, some academia, some kind of just an interested kind of citizen, one of my hats is the constant pushback. So every case that comes through, well, there's not many cases that are like this. This is the only one I've ever kind of come across. But any case that comes through, there's this massive seagull skeptic, right, that's just screaming at me in my head, and it's really important to balance that sensitively, because that's what a lot of experiences have, is they have a lot of pushback from the community and disbelief. And it's so hard for them to come forward most of the time anyway, that we don't want to push that back into the box. So with that kind of caveat, we're taking what I'm about to say in a pinch of salt, is that when I've kind of shown because the video is public and I've shown it to other people, we've had a discussion, and people have said to me, these are two middle-aged guys with high blood pressure, who high blood pressure is when you get particularly stressed is vulnerable to collapse. And there's until they can really prove, because I've known nothing about cameras. I'm aware that those two guys know a lot about cameras. They know the equipment, and they know that to fake that or to have a malfunction that leads to two cameras capturing the same stuff in the same location is so improbable that that we can kind of rule out that being a camera malfunction, what they captured. Because the real skeptical point of view is that they were on the beach, they're filming something that's basically an error in the camera. I don't believe that, but let's go with that hypothesis. An error in the camera. They see further errors of something coming towards them. They get anxious. When you initially say, "Oh, it's coming, let's go," I heard a degree of excitement in their voice, as you would. And the line between excitement and anxiety is really just how you psychologically label it. Physiologically, it's an immobilization thing to get you somewhere. But you could hear it shift to anxiety when he couldn't get up. But was that I am perceiving something coming towards me? Oh, wow. I now start to run up a beach and I've got high blood pressure and buff, it drops and I collapse. And now it was only one that collapsed from, I rewatched it, and then as he started to recover, the other one collapsed. I'm not sure the timing of that, but is that kind of, did they catch it from the other in terms of hysteria, that sense of, oh, this is really real. My brother's just collapsed on the floor, and the anxiety with it. I'm not saying I believe this stuff. I'm just kind of, overall, I got the impression they were pretty okay and they expected to see this stuff, and they probably feel like the luckiest UAP observers on the planet right now. And so they should. They've captured incredible stuff. But it only takes one case in history to be proven beyond all reasonable doubt, and that's a game changer. I mean, the Nimitz incident seems pretty close to that for me. Is this something similar that's approaching that? Like, so in my head, I'm watching it thinking, what would you have to stack up in order to have the alternative hypothesis that this is not UAP to be true? And it's a really high bar. You'd have to have two malfunctioning cameras. You'd have to have people who are expecting to see this kind of stuff, who should be relatively resilient to it. You'd also have to say that the high blood pressure caused a collapse. And does blood pressure cause a collapse from the waist down? I don't think so. I'm not a medical person, so I can't really advise how blood pressure impacts a collapse. But you can collapse in relation to psychological stress and blood pressure. So if it was a blood pressure explanation, you expect a loss of consciousness, I assume. Maybe, don't know. Maybe that needs a medical viewpoint. But again, that's a high bar of like, okay, that's a massive coincidence. They happen to collapse from high blood pressure at that particular time, at the time they see something coming towards them. Yeah. It wasn't the ships, because you can kind of see the other ships on the video. They light up completely different and they can see them. So that's clearly ruled out. Apparently they said in the video that Lou Elizondo and others have confirmed that there wasn't any secret tech being sort of done there. How true is that? I mean, very skeptical academics I've talked to have said, well, it is secret tech being beamed from space or something that's kind of going on there. And so maybe something was going on there that they captured in their cameras that was real, but because of their fear, the way you interpret it, that's what led to them kind of physiologically kind of collapsing. Until we could somehow rule that out, it's really hard to push the envelope really into the stratosphere about the case. But as I go through that, and when I've interviewed witnesses, it's like I feel really bad for having to navigate the kind of alternate hypothesis route, because I just feel like it's offensive, like it kind of and in some ways it would be if somebody made an allegation of rape, and the first thing people sit down and talk to them is about is, oh, I don't really believe you. Maybe you bumped your head, or like it's kind of 101. You receive and listen to people's accounts, but this account comes with so much data, physical data, that it's like, oh, that's quite interesting. The lymph nodes the next day, you kind of say, well, yeah, they can just randomly swell up, but that's kind of a bit of a tall order for the time of which that kind of sort of happens. Did they both catch a cold being out at 12 in the midnight, and both catch a cold, and the next day they wake up with swollen lymph glands and fatigue? And it's not a hypothesis you can rule out, but all these prosaic terrestrial things collectively seem more unplausible to me than the wider context of the millions of reports of UAP stuff, the UAP Disclosure Act, kind of how seriously it's been taken in Congress, all the countless witnesses that are out there. When you stack all that together, you kind of like, well, it's actually harder that it actually could be a bona fide real event beyond all doubt. And then that's when it becomes to the implications. Have they captured the smoking gun, like of a case as we're going to at this sort of point in history? And what's then the ramifications of that? Like it's, and that's, I find that area kind of quite intriguing. So again, not my view. I'm just putting on a skeptic hat for stimulating discussion. And if the witnesses are watching this, I do apologize. I don't mean to take this sort of skeptical sort of viewpoint, but it's these kinds of cases with people who come across as resilient enough to have an open discussion. And that, because I think this whole issue hides in the darkness, for want of a better pun. It hides in the darkness of let's not look at it, and it hides in the darkness of let's not put all the alternative prosaic explanations on the table and just let's examine them, and the truth will out at some point somehow. That's my initial bit.
Absolutely. We need that degree of critical thinking in all of these situations and these cases. But as you said, we have to be careful as well not to immediately just say to somebody, we don't believe you. We need to be able to make sure that we're walking that fine line there, Daniel. Yeah. Anybody else got any comments to add to that, to what Daniel's just said there?
Or helpful pushback, because I've raised points that aren't necessarily my point, but pushbacks, disagreements, or what? Yeah.
No,
I think no. Go ahead, Sarah.
Go ahead, Les. No, go ahead, Les.
No, I was just going to say that it's important to have a neutral attitude about these kind of things when you're working with a person. That you sit there and you listen to their story and don't make a judgment. Because for them this was a real experience, absolutely a real experience. And if they're working with a psychologist or a psychiatrist that has an attitude, well, these types of things are not real, that is absolutely the wrong person for them to go to. We need to be understanding and listen to their story. That's super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to compound on that as, working with and domestic violence, sex crime, there's oftentimes that everyone in the equation is a victim, and that asking some of those questions, it seems like you're prodding and poking, which is the last thing that you want to do when someone is in a vulnerable position. However, there's that responsibility of being objective, that playing that role of we need to get the supporting evidence. We need to get that physical, objective stuff, because as your memory changes, as time elapses, you're going to want to share this story, maybe heal from it, maybe prosecute someone, maybe. And the only way that you have the opportunity to do things in the future that can be objective is to build that objective foundation in that moment. So there's a certain responsibility to just ask those hard questions, but also be supportive when doing so. And that's what I think is important about the delegating of resources. And also, Daniel, you shared the, it would have to be that this, and the kitchen sandwich was there. And in which case, the reason UAP Medical Coalition is looking at this is a lot of those factors are present in this case. So if they do have a smoking gun of something amazing, they're going to be bombarded in every way, shape, or form. So this is just kind of a helpful preliminary practice, right?
Yep. And actually, the thing I wanted to comment on was you said the truth will out. And in these cases, that doesn't really happen generally. There's no second case to compare it to. There's no second occurrence. These are anomalous. Some of them happen to people only once ever. So it's very difficult to get that quote truth. So I think it's important that we put that aside sometimes. I definitely think when you're treating someone, what you think might be real or not real doesn't matter, because to them it is real. And that's what they need validation for, so they can integrate their experiences in their life.
And I just want to sort of add to that definitely 100% agree. I think the sticking point becomes, as this topic matures or becomes more open, somebody is going to say, well, my partner's seeing all these things, they're not true, and I want custody of the kids. And that needs to go to court. Or you're going to have, I crashed my car because I saw a UFO and it impacted me while I'm driving. I went limp. I crashed the car. And in those circumstances, it's going to have to go to that, the civil cases and the criminal cases, and they've got different bars, because I think, and I can't remember which is which, but it's sort of, you got that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, in this case, when you've got to add up all these prosaic things, you're literally clutching at straws to try and make that argument. And on the balance of probabilities, if it was like, yep, UAP are real and this is how they sort of present, and if you flash things at them like a bear, it might kind of growl back. Then on the balance of probabilities, that's actually the more likely explanation. And so we almost at some point need that legal kind of viewpoint on where that line is standard, which is different from the mental health treatment.
That's a good point, Daniel. The thing that is important is that these people do go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and then they find out that they do not have a psychopathology. Okay, and then what do you do with that? Okay, so here's this person who is sane, all right, is worried about losing custody of their children, but they have, you know, mental health professional telling the court that this person does not have a psychopathology, and so then what? You know, that becomes a really interesting.
Or what if
point.
they do?
And might and will. Maybe they have depression.
And what if they do? And that shouldn't.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I mean, you could be schizophrenic and still have had an experience.
Oh, you get there. I think you were going to make my point.
But here's something I need to point out. We're talking about two different things. One is a legal perspective, like with custody and accidents, and another is a treatment perspective. If someone is getting treatment and they validate this person and say you don't have other issues, or you do and they're treatable and that wouldn't have caused the car crash or whatever, that's one thing, right? But a legal perspective might not even take in, you know, all of that information. So those are, to me, two different things. And I think as mental health professionals, it's not our role to necessarily say whether or not someone caused a car accident, but to treat the person for the repercussions from that accident.
Which is true, but at the same time, it's like if somebody's got anorexia, you don't affirm that they are really obese. There's some things where you eventually find that the grey line moves into we've got to declare something as one or the other, and there's that sort of tussle. Ideally, that's best avoided. And more broadly, you're 100% right. In mental health treatment, you want to receive what it is they have to say from their sort of point of view. But then it's having to bear in mind that there's also the risk with that view that we enable cases that are believe more so in it because we're affirming it. So it's that fine line between affirmation and inquiry, and I think mutual open exploration. And I think to sort of circle back to more how I actually think is unless we educate a whole group of psychologists and mental health professionals, so that at least the possibility of being real for an account is potentially true, then it's at least a hypothesis on the table that they can kind of go off. I mean, and that's kind of what I
Daniel,
more want to advocate is that sort of.
Well, I'm going to say an ugly word. It's the ugliest word. It's so ugly. But I think of Deb and what she shared, because I don't, and this is my hand raised to humanity, you know, doing forensics. I actually didn't originally start because I cared about treatment. I did it for assessment, neuropsychology, and why the great reason. And so, Deb, when I think of treatment, man, what if this person did DMT and they're having an acid trip? What if they have a traumatic brain injury and this is a byproduct of a psychosis? What if they're seeing things that they're not really seeing, but it was suggested to them and they are a product of Stockholm syndrome? We got to figure this out before we can do treatment, because then we might be doing bad treatment.
More harm.
So that's where that fine line of I need to know what happened so that we can define the treatment that will work best for you. And then that person goes, I don't know what happened. And you go, I don't know either. And so then treatment is halted. But maybe you have radiation burns. Maybe you've got stuff that needs to be treated right now. Both people, the ugly word, liability. Oh no, that word I think falls into this in treatment providers. And then like, where does that line stop for the care of a person?
Which
That's
maybe brings it back to the actual case, because it's sort of those guys look like, I'm not sure if they were employed financially or they were doing a role as part of I'm not sure if I can mention the organization, but they weren't there just on a whim doing DMT on a beach. They were professionals that were doing a specific job. And usually people with a disturbed psychopathology that leads to hallucinations do struggle to hold jobs on average. It's so the roles that they were doing, the way they come across in the interviews, it's sort of my spider senses for detecting ill health wasn't particularly there. Yeah, in their case, they came across as genuine and excited and sort of interested. But again, can we say the organization they were affiliated with? I don't know if that's been mentioned elsewhere. But anyway, the people they were collecting the information for, are they liable? Because they were out there partly linked to that organization.
Yeah.
So what if they were harmed a little more than what they were? Or what if there is
need more money for that grant? They need more money now. That's what they need. Right? Because they will be.
Or yeah.
Won't they?
Do they need more money, which they do, or do the people realm need to bring us up to speed on, like, kind of, maybe there's protective gear you can wear so you can watch it and be free and to see it, maybe not, don't know, but it's the being refused access to key bits of information that stifle all of us. Because what if the people funding that project could have made those workers more safe if we just knew how to protect the risks? Yeah, and maybe somebody knows out there. Don't know.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned earlier, Daniel, about the need to educate mental health professionals to be able to treat these cases as people present to them on the basis that something has happened to them. And again, that is one of the key missions of UAP Medical Coalition, is to provide that kind of resource and that information. And certainly what we're doing here is working towards that and helping that by having this level of topic and discussion here, definitely. A question I'd throw out to all of you is, what do we think needs to happen in order for that level of understanding within the mental health profession to be there to provide that support?
Well, there's an educational process that needs to go on, and I think that that's something that we need more therapists that are familiar with the topic, because this thing is going to become more evident, especially as these hearings go on in Congress here in the U.S. And more people are validated as far as their experiences with the revelations that we have bodies, we have crashed UFOs and things of that nature, which I totally believe is true. I think Rush has got the credentials that have certainly, in his work with the NRO and organizations like that, he's been highly thought of. So, yeah, education to have these people understand that there's a phenomena going on here, which we truly don't understand fully. I mean, if we understand any of it, it's quite remarkable, not only from a technological standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint. So there's a lot to dig up and look at, and so it's a long-term process that needs to go on.
Yep. And I think there should be some social responsibility if you're going to present this information in the media, if you're going to encourage people to be investigators, if you're going to tell people that there could be craft that has crashed and put out books and put it out there. Someone needs to come out and say, you know, we should be responsible for how people respond to these things. We should have some care for people who are interacting with this. And it's frustrating to me that so far we're pretty much hearing crickets from people like like the organizations like Arrow about treating people. So yes, they're going to need the education to do so, but I feel like we've had over 75 years of people working on that. So I think it's about time something come out. There should be something presented to help people.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's such a stigma attached to this part of the phenomena, and prejudice that has been there, fomented by our government. I mean, you know, the CIA, you know, having, you know, putting out bogus stories about these events being swamp gas or what have you. You know, it's Venus or something. So there's a lot to unpack and try to overcome because of the stigma that's attached to this. So it's going to take time. It's just going to take time.
I'm proud of you, Les, for not saying Nibiru there, but also all of the opportunities of how things are talked about. I think creating a safe space. You know, I hate to use fluffy language at times, but I think this is like less education, Deb, that social support and responsibility, disclosure, transparency of our authoritative, you know, big daddy in the sky, whether that's government or religion or whomever, that we have some collaboration. All of those things, creating a safe space, I think, is what is going to have to happen, which that's why I think with the UAP Medical Coalition, you know, doing different things, those little tentacles of spearheading policy, trying to get in there with Congress and talk to them, or talking with educators. How do we get in there and get this into a curriculum? How do we talk about this without offending people? Safe space. And at least here in America, guys, that is a hard thing to find.
It's not an easy thing to find in the UK either. And I think Daniel would probably agree with me on that one, possibly.
Got it.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like it's impossible in the sense that when I look to some of the major charities in the UK around cancer, you can type in Bowel Cancer UK and you'll find sort of all semi-governmental backed kind of charities that you can go to for pretty reasonable information. I mean, they're not going to tell you to do Wim Hof cold breathing and cold water swimming and stuff, which might be good for you. But what I'm sort of saying is those organizations don't represent the fringe. They try and represent a core bit of safety around signposting and access to support. And I'd just eventually like to see the same sort of thing in the UAP area as well. And Les and others have been sort of trying to work on that. And UAP Med's definitely sort of part of that. But it's sort of it's creating that kind of thing that's needed. So as this issue becomes more known, and if the legislation gets passed that's got the 7-year disclosure plan, these kinds of organizations are going to be needed, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah, and the work that's been done by the likes of John Priestland and Unhidden, who I know, Daniel, we're both talking to here in the UK, I'm noticing the difference that's making. And this is a topic I've been involved with for 30 years here in the UK, and I'm seeing change that I haven't seen before. I'm hearing discussions that I haven't heard before. The fact we're all here today doing this is a huge step forward as well. So I'll take that opportunity to thank you all for taking your time and your expertise to talk with us. One of the other
I also wanted
to... Sorry, Daniel, go on. After you.
I was going to say about even though we've given a little bit of our feedback of our impressions, I still kind of wonder a little bit what some of our real impressions are, because I've been following this topic for about three and a half years, which is nothing compared to some people who've been doing it for 20, 30 years, their sort of whole life. But it's like the more you go down the rabbit hole, the more it's like another sort of door opens up. And then you get to know more information where it feels like, wow, this seems so much more real. And I think the UAP, the Disclosure Act from the legislation was like God, wow, you know, maybe I really am not wasting my time. Maybe this really is heading in the right direction. And for me, watching this video again was another like, wow, okay, that's like it. I don't know how to put it into words, but there's just a felt sense of when people say, "Oh, you still looking at the UFO stuff?" So, yeah, I just watched a video of some people collapse on a beach after filming UFOs that they could only see in the infrared, and they're like, "Oh." Like it's kind of I suppose what I'm saying is it's impactful even for me to watch the video and to think I've never actually seen any anomalous stuff, so maybe it's because I've not been exposed, or maybe I haven't seen them. I didn't have my infrared goggles on, but it's kind of like it's still almost like an exploration of ideas for some of us who are interested but we're not experiencers. And seeing things like this does hit home a little bit more as like we're not playing. This seems they may have captured something real, and it's just has an emotional kind of impact that even when I'm braced and ready to think I'm ready to see it. It's
well,
yeah.
this is I mean, great. You know, you've now experienced something that has opened up another few brain cells for you to really think about. I think that people that don't have experiences like this sort of have a cognitive dissonance about the whole subject, you know. But I think with the amount of coverage that the media is presenting, the shows on television, the podcasts that are out there, this is really starting to now solidify the people's consciousness about this whole thing, and saying, "Oh my goodness, you know, here we're seeing videos, we're seeing people's comments and their stories about what happened to them, and there seems to be some evidence, you know, with regard to implants that these people have."
Liz, don't say that. I mean, the devil's advocate. Think about that. It's not just how you look at the sky or what you're seeing on Netflix, which everything now is alien related, but it's that implants, synthetic nanotechnology, that's going to be affected. Digital currency and how people are maneuvering through what could be AI and things you don't see and all your stuff shutting down. It could be cattle mutilations and the agricultural people, and now we don't have any food.
Yeah, well, I mean, now you're going down a whole nother avenue that opens up a real rat's nest, if you will.
But it's connected.
A little bit down that, a little bit down that rabbit hole. Just because I did write down a third hypothesis. So we've got it's true. The other hypothesis is it's false. The other hypothesis is that I haven't mentioned yet is, remember slide 9. And on slide 9 that most of you will know about is the cognitive human interface. Now, I don't know exactly how validated or true those things are, but the third hypothesis with this case is that whatever went on was none of what was captured. That if they can manipulate space-time as you may need to do if you're going to zip around in that kind of way, and you can alter human perception, maybe everything that was captured in the experience was not as it may seem through our 5 senses. Don't know.
Exactly.
Man, Project Bluebeam craziness, right? It goes down into government disclosure. We need to know, what is that? And we're in a kind of hot time politically that if you don't know what you know, that could be a bad time.
You know, you mentioned space-time. I mean, yeah, they can bring you back before they take you. I mean, there's time slippage. There's time. I mean, it's incredible, this technology. And so once you start bringing up those kind of facts, it really gets dicey. It gets very dicey quickly.
But then it comes a little bit back to 99.9% of the time for most people, it won't be this topic of explanation that explains what's happening in their life. And I think that's where the reduction of the panic is. Yeah, you know, all these things are theoretically possible. Maybe they do exist, but most people aren't going to experience them, and which is okay.
Yeah.
I think what is important as part of what we need to do going forward is to try to normalize this a little bit. I think one of the reasons people do panic and aren't prepared is because it has been sensationalized, and people are so they feel alone, they're isolated. And I feel like if we just normalize the conversation, like for instance, gorillas, right? Gorillas were not something people would regularly see, say, 200 years ago. They were seen by indigenous people, but in general, the rest of the world didn't really believe that they existed. And people actually faked gorillas and like put them on display as fake gorillas. But then when people started to see them, it's not a big deal. So if we ran into a gorilla in the jungle, it'd be like, oh, that's a gorilla, not a big deal. They're not going to be so scared. They might not go near a silverback because they're knowledgeable, but it's not going to be something that they have PTSD about necessarily, right? So if we just sort of normalize the conversation as part of that social responsibility, I think we'll have less repercussions, less trauma, less shock. So that's just a thought.
Because I don't see atoms, but I'm pretty sure they exist. And if you split them, bad things happen. So, it's it normalizing. Atoms are real. Kind of maybe we can one day get to a point where,
And over the last 200 years, we've come to learn about the microscopic life that lives on the planet, which is actually the most large by volume and by weight. And we couldn't see it until a couple of hundred years ago. And now we live and we understand what it is and why it's there. So, a similar process of understanding and normalization.
We're dealing
Before
with
we go off,
sorry,
Les, go on.
I was just going to say that we're dealing with another reality that we don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go off down any more rabbit holes, one thing I would like us to talk about is we commented earlier that these two gentlemen were actively out there researching and looking at the UAP subject and topic. Do we feel that could have had an impact on how they reacted to what they saw? Or do we feel that, for example, if somebody else had experienced what they'd seen without an interest in the topic, do we feel there'd have been a different outcome or a different reaction there? What's anybody's thoughts on that?
I don't know if there would have been a different reaction, but these guys were much more prepared to handle the eventuality of anything going down like it did. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at.
I think, man, Dr. Daniel, when you're like all the things I think, I have a lot of thoughts on that, but without sharing the details of these individuals, because that's their information to do so. They're highly trained, sober, in a supported, what they know to be safe space, out doing grant research for highly respected, established organizations. Prepared as one can be, I think. They're not out there doing an entertainment, wine and dine, looking for stuff in the sky. But yet the interaction was unique, and how the UAP interacted with them was a thing. And then I think, going on Deb's normalization, they didn't have to reach out, but they felt though they should. They felt that responsibility to other researchers as this topic fuels fire and spreads, that, man, maybe we should share this because we don't know. And I feel like that's really important, because they weren't looking for notoriety. They definitely, were working against stigma in their professional space. And a lot of times, at least on social media, people want to share their story if they think it will gain them some attention or notoriety. So trying to filter through that attention-seeking space for what is real, again, and that their social response is to not make fun of something, but yet at the same time, people are going to be peopling, and they're going to make fun of things that are uncomfortable. And aliens are scary. I think of Joaquin Phoenix in his tinfoil hat saying, "Vamonos, children." And these are some of the first thoughts in my mind. And so for many other people who have just been raised by media. So, I think it would be different, and should be.
Yeah.
From person to person.
I do have to say, we have to throw out a phrase that gets thrown out once in a while called confirmation bias. You know, we need to put that out there. I don't think the people in the scientific community will appreciate their experience the same way, because they're like, oh, you just went out there and had an experience and confirmed your bias that you would have an experience. So, but we have heard so many other people who are not researchers, who are not prepared, who might just be, you know, amateur people interested. Like, I personally also got infrared binoculars, you know, and they have had the same reaction as these individuals. And there's been cases where thousands of people have witnessed something at the same time, like the Phoenix Lights, you know, and they have had the same reaction as these individuals. So we can't say this is confirmation bias, but it is a term we need to recognize.
Yeah, I don't have anything particularly to add. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think you've already covered it quite well in your alternate hypothesis as well, Daniel, with your comments about these people seemingly perhaps being more resilient because they had an expectation to see it as well. So one other question I'm going to ask before we come towards the end of this, I will leave it for now. I'm going to ask you before we finish what one wish I could grant you if I was your fairy godmother. But before I come to that one, I'd just like to ask Daniel a little bit, if you could share with us a little bit about some of the research that you've been doing, Daniel, if you're happy to do so.
Yeah, so I'll give you a brief overview for the breadth of time. So the first project we did was we got 4 UAP experiences and did some qualitative interviews on how the experiences impacted them, and what psychological or what services they thought needed to be in place. Now, just getting it up to remind myself. So, I mean, it was a small study with only sort of 4 participants, but I was trying to capture what, because John Mack's work on the participants that he sort of had, they were case studies, but it wasn't done with a methodology. So, yeah, that's why I applied for this sort of first study, and it was just a way of just getting one-to-one with people. The central question was, what effect did the UAP exposure have on participants? And what I found was that there was ontological shock, anxiety, anger, paradoxical reactions. Some of them saw UAP and were just filled with this overwhelming love sort of feeling, and others were kind of almost like, oh, whatever, I'm seeing this massive craft. Okay, and they sort of carried on. And looking back, they found that was really strange, how they just had a non-response as well. And then as I said before, the interpersonal and intrapersonal loneliness and isolation. And then they had social impact. So the difficult experiences of denial from others, and also the skeptical kind of pushback that people had towards them, the relationship strain, and the lack of external help. So they were some of the things that kind of came out of their cases. Then I asked the question of what unmet needs do they have? So what needs to be in place? And so they also said external validation. We need a high level, government level, or at least some sort of national level validation that this can be very, very, very real. Non-judgmental listening, a person-centered professional formulation of their case and their history, because some had a history of mental health issues, some didn't. Kind of, and you're going to expect that. It's sort of mental health. You know, something like 1/3 of the population has been depressed in the lifespan, so you can't discount 1/3 of the population because they've had a mental health issue. It needs a person-centered professional formulation on their case and their life and their journey. Some were legitimate to report sightings. Many of them had sightings and they weren't aware of even where to go. And professionally run support groups, which is sort of starting to come up. So that was kind of like the small little first study I did. And then the second study looked at the personality variables. So all human beings can be measured on the big 5, the conscientiousness, openness, agreeableness, neuroticism, and extroversion. And we also measured schizotypy as well, which is more like an odd perceptual personality profile proclivity. And so what I was doing was comparing those who have had UAP sightings to those that haven't. Now, I couldn't verify if any of them were real, you know, but they alleged they wrote their experiences, and the types of experiences had were the same proportions as what Arrow released in their military pilots. So they were the same, like, or almost the same, like with the cube and the cigar shapes and the disc shape, and it was just pretty similar proportions. So compare the UAP to non-UAP. The reason I was doing that study is it's because it doesn't push me in a position to say that they're saying the truth. It's what it puts me in a position to do is to explore the personality variables, which is far less contentious from an academic sort of science point of view. But that aside, I'll do whatever I can with the resources I have. And so what we found was that, like prior research where they'd looked at extraterrestrial belief, I didn't think looking at extraterrestrial belief is necessarily the way to go, because the more eccentric fringe people are going to believe more eccentric things. So the finding that people who have a certain personality type are more likely to believe in extraterrestrials doesn't really tell me much. So that's why I looked at those that have had sightings versus those that haven't. And we had 103 who had sightings and 103 that hadn't. And it just happened to split down the middle. We collected it via sort of Twitter. So it was people interested in the topic. So you could say it's not necessarily the same as measuring the personality variables on people who have had no exposure or interest in this topic, but you're always going to have some challenges with your sample. And so what we found is that people who see UAPs are more likely statistically to be high in openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness, low in neuroticism, and low in schizotypy. So what we sort of found was the typical profile of the UFO admitter. So maybe it's not just, because you could say they self-reported to be an experiencer, but we don't know how many people who saw something who won't admit it to themselves. So I say somebody who admits to seeing a UFO and allows themselves to think that they've seen it, that they are more likely to be conscientious and agreeable, and which is the opposite of the status quo hypothesis, where it's anxious, perceptually all over the place people who see a UAP. And we did not find that in the data. We found it was the more conscientious, kind of open and agreeable types that were likely to. Billion people, you're going to find everything significant. So it's all about the effect size between two overlapping distributions more than the statistical significance. The statistical significance is important, but effect sizes more so. And our effect sizes were ranging from them. So essentially they were small. So the narrative is essentially all kinds of people see UAP. It's more likely to be those that report it are more likely to be high in agreeableness and conscientiousness, kind of quite good qualities. But that's not really a massive difference. So all kinds of people see them. So the more interesting thing to me from that study was that the kinds of things people report in the public are very, very similar in proportion to what Arrow was reporting. Also that only 14% of people reported their sighting anywhere. If you take in to telling a friend and telling people at your church and other stuff, it's like 28% mentioned it to anybody. But 14% reported it to, was it MUFON or kind of one of the a group that tries to collect stuff. So if you think of all the millions of sightings that have been reported in MUFON and all the other things over the years, Graham Rendell's work, everything, that probably represents about 14% of all the true sightings that are out there. So yeah, I found that quite interesting. So the next projects is that we're just about to put in ethics. Don't know what we'll get through. The first one we're going to look at is the rates of PTSD, wider mental health and quality of life kind of measure, and adverse childhood experiences. So that's kind of what I want to look at as the next kind of academically safe little step forward. It's like we've kind of explored personality and found, you know what, actually there's no real difference. Let's look a little bit more at mental health, and let's look a little bit more at trauma symptoms. Now, I'm expecting only a small number to show trauma symptoms, but maybe not, don't know. I've been networking over time with people, and I'm hoping that people who are far more in the know can contribute. So it's more people, because if it gets approved, I plan on trying to go around and promote it a bit more so I can get as many experiences of a bigger array as possible. And now lots of people have positive experiences. I think the free study had something like 40%, if not higher, had a positive kind of experience, or it eventually became positive. And great. I suppose I'm more interested about, is there an argument for developing more psychological services for people who have really struggled with their experience? Hence why I want to look into the trauma effects. And then the other study, and this may be even harder to get through ethics, is I've made my student has made a 40-minute video of like the congressional hearings, some of the key David Fravor testimony, the aerial. I've pieced together what I consider to be the most kind of verified, kind of out there stuff that has got a pretty solid foundation. Yeah, it's just so. Because my plan was to measure people's emotions before and afterwards, and then 6 weeks later, and to sort of see how they respond to this content. Because now it may not get through ethics, because it could be argued that what I'm going to show them is too ontologically shocking. But it's going to be a small group of probably about 20 people, because I'm going to have to do some qualitative interviews with them afterwards, and I expect there's going to be a diversity of responses. There's some people aren't going to care, some people will, and everything kind of sort of in between. But it may be a hard one to get through ethics, because it may rock some people's worldview too much. But if it's going to happen anyway, then I'd like to start measuring on a small scale and see how it kind of goes. And just, does that compare between younger people and older people? Because in the personality study I did, we found that young people, kind of 18 to 25, were far less likely to have seen a UAP. That it seemed to increase a bit over the course of the lifespan, but that's probably a function of the amount of life you've led and what you've been exposed to. But yeah, so we'll see if I manage to get that off the ground, that one, and if I get a few through, then I'll slowly kind of get more, because really it's a bit of an education campaign. Like if you sit somebody down, like I mean, the congressional hearing, for example, the third one, it's like, we probably told a lot more people than actually watched it. And even though it's got probably 1 million views or something on YouTube, and that's a lot of them are just sort of clicks and journalists and having a look or whatever, it's kind of like most people have not sat down and watched it. And my original thought was to just get the congressional hearing, just sit down and watch that and see what you make of it. But yeah, it's a bit longer than I kind of could, so I sort of wanted to piece it together a little bit more closely to that. And ideally, start this on a small scale, because if I get it through ethics and I get 20 people, that's not really enough to do a good statistical analysis. It's more of a qualitative thing. But if I can get 10 other universities doing similar things, we can pull it together and have a bigger study and looking at sort of some of these effects. So I'm trying with the absolute no money resources that I have and the students that I sort of oversee, amongst all the other kind of gazillion things I've got to do.
So for those listening, we need your money. We want your information. Please collaborate. Man, Daniel, you shared something in there that for me, in that like forensic space, working in crisis and policy, and I love to play devil's advocate. You shared some things and some words there that make my citizen vessel quiver. Things like, if you consider the personality trait of openness and agreeableness, sometimes passive, maybe these people more likely to go with the flow, could be an antagonist to someone who's conservative and extrovertive and out there doing things, changing the flow. So sociologically, especially here in America, that duality begins to show itself, and you have one group far more likely maybe to be having UAP experiences. And how does that correlate with obedience? With seeing things and being inundated with UAP phenomenon. Oh no. And who the authority is that controls the electromagnetic spectrum and where and how that is used to manipulate people. Deb has shared things in some of our groups about binaural beats. Those in the paranormal and metaphysical realms are quite familiar with how organisms fluctuate when they're around certain electric vibes, man. And all of what you're talking about is related to power and control and obedience and the weaponization of information and things that are very relevant right now. And I love it that you're doing it optimistically. And I think other people in the realms will be interested pessimistically. So it's important.
I think what we'll also find, and we won't do this through small studies, but bigger studies, is that like any, I don't like the word fringe, but I can't think of a better thing, a marginalized topic.
Niche.
A niche, yeah. There is always the potential for small groups of psychopathic people to control the narrative. And you see that in lots of different spheres of lots of different niche kinds of topics.
Yeah,
and
look at our politics. Look at our politics.
They're there. They're here. They're here. They're here.
I'm sure you can think of UAP characters in this topic that may fit some of that bill, where it's kind of like, it always seems like they're stirring a pot and they're not exactly particularly conscientious, or anyway.
I have to say, though, I have to hone in on your comment about only about 14% are reporting. Not only are there significantly more people having experiences that are not reporting, there are also people who don't know where to report. And then I also want to just remind people of cultural bias. Like, we very much look at the case in terms of the Western viewpoint, but many indigenous people have talked about the paranormal and normalized it for centuries. And
they don't call it paranormal because it's normal.
Yes, right. And then, of course, there's also the Eastern perspective. So I think we have to be careful about who we're pulling that information from, because not only are there people not reporting, but there are people who wouldn't see any point in reporting because it's so normal for them.
Indeed.
Absolutely, Deb. Great point. And that maybe they don't want to report it because they don't want anyone's fingers involved in what's otherwise quite spiritual and normal.
Yeah.
And sacred.
Part of the day today. Yeah. Folks, we are coming towards the end of our time here together today. So, as promised, and I'm glad I gave you a little bit of a heads up on this one, as I don my fairy godmother outfit and wave my magic wand, Shazam, what one thing would you wish for to help move this topic forward and ultimately provide better support to people who are experiencing these phenomena? And I'll start with Deb on this one, and then I'll go to Daniel, to Les, and finally we'll close with you, Sarah.
Man, you only let me do one? Okay.
One wish. I'm not if I was a genie, if I was a djinn, you could have 3 wishes, but I'm not. I'm a fairy godmother today.
Okay, well, if I could only do one, I would like this topic to be treated much like AHI was treated, which is anomalous health incidents, where they had a task force with funding. And not only did they seek out cause, but they sought out treatment and provided funds to people who were victims. So I guess my one wish would be a task force, and that would come with public acknowledgement and science and research and, respect.
Wish granted.
My wish might not necessarily be the best thing for humanity. We'll only know once we do it, but it's we need to roll out just one craft and body that is verifiable and that presidents, world leaders say, yep, that's true, and ideally, like the Queen's death, we can all go up and have a little look. And I'm not trying to make fun of it, but I'm trying to sort of say about it. Yeah, for me, if I could have one wish, because I think everything else will cascade in relation to that, or maybe not. Maybe we'll just go about our lives. I don't know, but I'd certainly like that from a science point of view, at least.
Official confirmation, evidence-based of non-human intelligence, where, as you said, we can not only see it but experience it as well as individuals. Love that. Wish granted. Les, over to you.
Well, it's been brought up that these people have a difficult time and they don't know where to turn. So I guess my wish would be that all people would understand that there is resources where they could turn to and get the kind of help that they need.
I love it. And I think the work that's being done by Opus, by Unhidden, by UAP Medical Coalition can only further that. So again, Les, no surprise, wish granted.
Thank you.
Finally, Sarah.
Man, this is a hard question. And I know you did give us a little bit of a thought time there, and this is horrible that my brain goes here, but I actually think of powdered covered dog poop in a box. I think of how important it is in the human game that disclosure is there. So I feel like you're not hoarding real donuts. You're not hoarding anything delicious and amazing and useful if it's not those things, you know, and you're not putting a gate up around, you know, the worst house on the block. We protect those things that we love or that we find sacred or that we find important. And I think that hoarding and keeping and greed, I do think that there's a certain level of a lack of empathy there, whether it's self-awareness or whatever the intentions are. So I think I would want my magic wand, and I carefully wave this thinking of psychopathy in mind, of people to be able to control their empathy in a positive way, because so much of this problem is a human problem. And perhaps, you know, the discussions of why there is UAP interaction, that we need help. We need a little help from our friends. And maybe they're not going to talk to us if we're fighting over stuff at the playground. And empathy is so important just for other cultures, like Deb shared, to be able to see and understand and be able to turn it off so that we're not responding as a big central nervous system monster, that we can empathize and control that empathy in a good way.
That would be a beautiful gift. Wish granted.
Now I'm out of a job. Thanks, Davey. No, I'm kidding.
I want your wish, Davey. What is your wish?
Yeah.
I knew that was going to come. And my wish, I'm going to ask for something really simple. I'm going to wish that we come back in 3 months' time as a group and that the topic has moved on significantly.
Amen.
Amen. Too great. Let's just hope that we can all come back together in 3 months and be having a better discussion, let's say. Good
wish. Okay, your wish is granted as well.
Thank you, everybody. On that note, I will draw our session today to a close. I would like to say a huge thank you to everybody for your openness, your frankness, your willingness to debate and discuss this topic, your expertise that you've brought to bear. And I look forward to us all meeting again and having a follow-up discussion in 3 months' time. In the meantime, if anybody would like to know anything more about UAP Med, please head across to uapmed.org and watch this space for more upcoming information. Thank you all very much indeed, everybody.
Take care.